we came across these bright red splashes of blood on the snow. Just imagining being in that tent and having a hand, 6 feet up in the air, shadowed against the tent, touching it. Probably the most terrifying thing I encountered.
This is the Cryptic Creatures Podcast. I am Brian, and with me as always is my co-host Todd. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, man. I'm just getting ready for this show and getting excited about talking to our guest tonight. How you doing?
I know. Sounds like a good one. I'm doing good, man. Doing good. I'm ready.
Me too. We're bringing Michelle on. She's written a couple books and owns a bookstore in Portland, Maine. And going to talk about Bigfoot.
Yep, I'm excited about that. I read her book. You read a little bit of her book. It's going to be good to talk to her and pick her brain on the whole writing process and the people she talked to and everything.
Right, exactly. And she actually went to these people's houses and spoke to them one-on-one. So it's kind of cool how she put this together. So
yeah,
let's not waste any more time. Let's bring her on. Ready?
Heck no, let's get her.
All right, here we go. Hey, Michelle, how's it going?
It's going great. How's it going with you?
Good, we're good. Thanks for coming on.
Good. Yeah, we're excited you're here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be talking to you guys finally.
Yeah.
I know. It's been we set this up a while ago, so I'm glad we finally got to connect.
Right. So for the audience, Michelle, you have a bookstore and have written a couple books, and you reside in Portland, Maine.
Yep, that's correct.
One of your books is called Bigfoot in Maine, which I've read, and Brian has read as well.
That's right. I got it sitting right here beside me, as a matter of fact.
Right. He has the copy. So what made you start getting interested in writing books and being an author and having a place there in Portland, Maine?
Oh, well, the whole writing thing, I started by doing the Strange Maine blog, and one of the earliest posts on it was actually me discovering that there were actually historic Bigfoot accounts in Maine, and asking people if they'd had any encounters of their own. I didn't become a published author until my publisher, History Press, discovered my blog and then asked me to write what became Strange Maine, True Tales from the Pine Tree Stage. And then about a decade later, I finally finished Bigfoot in Maine, and they published that too.
Right. Were you interested in Bigfoot before you started doing this? Was there some kind of knowledge in your mind of what Bigfoot was, or did you believe in Bigfoot at all?
I've always been curious about Bigfoot. When I was a kid, I would spend, part of my time in the library looking through all the unexplained mysteries type books. So I was definitely, had read voraciously on UFOs and the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. But I didn't ever think that I would have any chance of encountering one or talking to people who had encountered a Bigfoot. That's all been kind of a recent development that my 10-year-old self would have been very surprised about.
Reading your book, the thing I liked about it is that you tried to make personal contact with these individuals. I believe you did with most of them, which is really neat. Just instead of calling on the phone and talking to them one-on-one like that, you actually made the effort to get out to their area and talk to these people in person, right?
Yeah, I did whenever that was possible. And even when that wasn't possible, I tried to personally visit the locations of their encounters so that I had a better sense of the area.
And not everybody was all very excited to talk to you, though, right?
I definitely had a few people that I approached that I either never heard back from or they changed their minds about talking to me. They decided they didn't want to talk to anybody, even though they had originally kind of put up a flare and reached out. So, yeah.
Yeah, we get that too. We've got people.
Yeah, we get that a lot.
that say they'll come and talk, and then they kind of back out, which it's understandable. A lot of people don't want to go through or relive these encounters honestly and talk about it
right
out loud. So
yeah, it's one of those life-changing things, and talking to somebody and going on record about it kind of opens you up to a whole other realm of issues. And so yeah, when somebody decides they don't want to talk, I totally understand.
So what was the neatest part about writing that book, the Bigfoot in Maine book that you did? What was the most fun about it for you?
Well, it was a great excuse to poke around in corners of Maine I hadn't been to before, didn't know much about. But honestly, I was surprised by the end how many people had talked to me and how many different stories I heard. I think it was just that alone made it worth, working all those years on the book. Was that when I first started the book, I didn't expect to have 20 plus people who would be willing to talk to me and answer my questions and tell me all about what happened to them. So I would think that was probably the most exciting result, besides the fact that there were that many people who had experiences in Maine, which is, it's always a big question mark. Are they really out there? Are people really encountering them? And apparently in Maine, the answer is yes.
When we started this, we had no idea Maine was such a big Bigfoot area. We had no idea how densely forested that state was. We really didn't know much about Maine, actually. And then we started talking to a couple people out there and started to research into it more. And then we found you, and it's just crazy how much it is out there.
Yeah, and you guys talked to Mike Vachon, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he kind of comes up in it because his uncle has been doing it for years. So he's got a whole history behind him of unmistakable activity and encounters.
Yeah, we talked to Michael. We talked to Janelle too. I noticed that you had done a little part on Janelle's, actually a big part on Janelle's story.
Yeah. She's her family's stories are epic, and that whole community that she's continuing to collect information from is just rife with activity even today.
How did you come across getting in touch with these people, or how did you get a list of the people that had these encounters?
Well, I mean, there was no list originally. I started out putting out the word that I was looking for accounts like these, and I got a few people who talked to me about that. And then a few word of mouth. I have a friend, Nomar Slavic, who does UFO investigations in Maine, and he sent me, I think, 2 or 3 of the people who are in the book. He referred them to me because I send him UFO folks whenever I get the chance. And then the rest were mostly me picking up on just little comments people had posted online and trying to track them down. Janelle, I didn't think I would ever actually get a hold of because she had posted on a chat board that's now defunct. And the email address she had posted was old and defunct. And so I, tried a bunch of stuff to try to figure out how to get in touch with her, not even knowing her name at that point, just knowing her usernames that she used. And then joined the Maine Bigfoot Foundation group on Facebook, and she posted the article about her father's encounter, and I realized this is the person that I've been trying to get in contact for 3 years now. So that was a really exciting moment, and the fact that she was very willing to talk about everything was just kind of the cherry on top. So that was kind of an adventure.
Yeah, it was fun talking to her too. We really enjoyed that episode. Yeah, Michael's we called Encounters in Maine. Actually, was the title of that episode for Michael's episode too, and he had some really interesting things going on in his encounters. So But
Yeah.
my family and I made a trip up to Maine a couple months ago, actually, and was checking it out. We actually were in Portland, and I apologize for not stopping by and checking out your store at the time. I had not read your book yet,
Oh.
but I went hiking up there, and it's definitely very dense everywhere you go in the state of Maine, for sure. It's kind of crazy how
Yeah.
dense it really is.
Yeah, as soon as you step off the trail and you try to do any bushwhacking, you realize. And I think that was one of the big things about starting to investigate these encounters, was to like go out there and learn some outdoorsmanship and get out there and learn how to orienteer through the woods, and then to try to bushwhack through certain areas and realize how, in some ways, impenetrable that screen of greenery that's all around you is, but at the same time, how it's not actually impenetrable if you can find a way to work your way through it, like the game trails and stuff like that. So that was really illuminating to go out there and experience all of that repeatedly.
So, what's one of your favorite stories of the book that you wrote there? Which one stands out to you the most?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of them that stand out to me, and I kind of shift gears, and sometimes I'm really excited about Mike Ledbury's encounter. Obviously Janelle stands out. Susie, who had all the childhood experiences, is kind of an unforgettable one. But one of my earlier interviews was with the fellow who had the tent encounter in his cousin's backyard up in Aroostook County. And that, for some reason, just imagining being in that tent and having a hand, 6 feet up in the air, shadowed against the tent, touching it as you're trying to not freak out and wake your cousin up so he makes noise. That there are moments where that's my favorite one.
Yeah, that definitely is scary to think about, because it's like, is that a human playing a trick on me? No, it's too big to be human. Bears don't have hands like that. Oh,
yeah.
Shit.
And trying not to make any noise, right. And knowing that, if your cousin wakes up, he's going to make noise, and just, you don't know what's going to happen at that point. That's the tension in that moment.
So when you went to some of these locations, were you, did you sense anything? Did you have any kind of reactions at any point, or kind of interaction of anything, or see anything?
I did not. I went out a couple of times with one of my friends who's a Maine guide, a registered Maine guide. And what I was surprised by was the fact that he could pick up on, signs and sounds of the animals that had passed by us while we were there that I hadn't noticed. We were in an area that had a tremendous amount of deer, but we didn't see any of them. But the traces that they left and the little sounds that they made that he knew to pick up on were just there the whole time. And I didn't, I thought I was listening sharply. I thought I was being really observant, and I missed it all. So I unfortunately didn't encounter anything like that. Probably the most terrifying thing I encountered was out in the woods down in York County in the winter. We were going through an area that had tall pines overhead, but then kind of open at the ground level. You could see a fair distance between the trees. And we came across these bright red splashes of blood on the snow that was in patches under the trees, and then heard really loud crashing noises probably about 100 feet away in the underbrush where we couldn't see. And then hightailing it out of there, figuring it was probably really late deer wedding or something like that. Like we had obviously interrupted something. So we decided prudence was the best course of action, because whatever it was sounded really large, and with the amount of blood that we saw, we didn't want to run into a wounded animal and see what would happen next. So we hightailed it out of there pretty quick.
So the Durham gorilla, I see that listing there in your book, and I don't quite remember that story, but why don't you tell us about that? I'm interested in that story for the title.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The Durham gorilla is probably Maine's most famous Bigfoot story. And it happened, in kind of high Bigfoot season in 1973 along the town line between the two towns of Durham and Brunswick. A group of kids was out biking summer vacation, like late June, late July. At any rate, they were out biking. There wasn't much else to do out there, so they spent a lot of their time just biking around on these long, curving country roads under the trees. And Tamara had gotten ahead of the other kids because her friend that she was, having a sleepover and everything with, had her two younger brothers with her, and they, of course, smaller bikes, smaller legs, not as fast, and so she had to hang back with them while Tamara had gotten way ahead of them, probably about a quarter mile from the way I figured it from looking at it on the map. And she could still hear them in the distance, but she couldn't see them anymore because of the curve in the road. So she stopped at the top of this little hill and looked into the forest as she was standing there waiting, killing time. And there was something looking back at her, something about her height, covered in dark hair, with these green eyes that seemed to almost glow in the dimness of under the tree canopy. And so she and this creature just stared at each other, just, astonished. I think both of it, the impression she got was that they were both astonished at what they were seeing and very curious. She thought the creature was probably about her age. She kind of just got that impression from it, that it was a juvenile like she was. And they just stood there staring at each other, probably for less than 5 minutes, I would guess. And she had totally forgotten that the other kids were coming up behind her, which they eventually did. And her friend Lois saw what she was looking at and shrieked, toppled off her bike. There was a whole brouhaha. And of course, the creature was immediately pivoted and took off into the woods, disappeared. And there was just, at that point on, basically mayhem. Tamara and Lois and the two younger boys went back to Lois's parents' house to, patch up her knee because she had skinned it when she fell off her bike. And her parents called law enforcement in the area, and the word got out. And by the end of it, dozens of law enforcement personnel and their vehicles had gotten involved. A local radio station had announced that there was a large mystery creature in the woods that was potentially dangerous. And the public just kind of went bonkers. It's like something out of a B monster movie where, all the guys show up in their trucks with their guns and the beer and they try to go find the monster in the woods. They had to basically post patrols to keep civilians out of the woods because they didn't want that kind of mayhem going on in there. And for a few days, that whole area was just in an uproar. There were helicopters involved, just a continual flow of law enforcement vehicles searching the area. And then, of course, private citizens like Lois's mother also organizing their own searches because she apparently also encountered the creature as well.
Yeah, I was
So,
going to say,
mayhem.
wasn't there several encounters during the mid to late 70s in Maine and around that area? The same kind of thing going on?
Yeah, just a few years later, and about just a couple of miles away, Mike Ledbury had his repeated encounters with a family group, which lived in the woods around where he lived with his family. So yeah, and he kind of vaguely knew that something had gone on a few years before, but they had just moved into the area recently, and so he wasn't as aware of it as probably people who lived there during that event. So yeah, and he just kind of tackled it in his own way. And actually, probably not too different than how Tamara would have investigated it if she had had the chance without all the brouhaha going on. Mm-hmm. So he took a very National Geographic approach to it, and having read about Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall and everybody who was trying to work with primates, he kind of tried to adopt some of their methods and had some interesting results.
Gotcha. Cool. So what was the other book that you've written? Is it about Bigfoot or?
It is. It's called Strange Maine, True Tales from the Pine Tree State. And that's all. It's kind of a smorgasbord of odd Maine stuff. There is actually a chapter in it which deals specifically with weird creatures in the wood. And there is part of the chapter is actually kind of the seeds of what became Bigfoot in Maine later. So I wrote about, how Maine, there was a scientist in Maine who was breeding unicorns at one point in the 30s. And, the specter moose and other fun things like that. So, yeah, there's a good variety in there.
Yeah.
You got to figure somebody's going to try it, right? Why not? I'll make a unicorn. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, why not?
And do it as part of the University of Maine's laboratory system. So it was, done at a biological lab station that was official and everything was on record. So it was pretty well documented.
Wow. Okay. So you own the Green Hand Bookshop. What kind of books are we going to find there if we stop in there and look around? All kind of different kind of cryptid related books, or more than that, or what?
Oh, well, I have a little bit of everything. Pretty heavy on the genre stuff like sci-fi and horror and mystery, but I definitely do have a decent cryptozoology section. Plenty of esoteric stuff. Lots of UFO and ghost books too. When I first opened the bookshop, at the same time, Lauren Coleman opened his International Cryptozoology Museum in its first public presence, and he sublet my back room from me, so we shared space for the first few years. And so I actually had his big Crookston Bigfoot carving figure up in the front of my bookshop for the first few years that I was open. So there was plenty of Bigfoot in there.
Cool. That's awesome. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we stopped by and checked that out when we were there. Is he building a new building now? I heard maybe he's relocating into a new place or something.
I know that later this summer he did double the space he was in and moved into the space that was next to it as well. Okay, but gotcha. I'm sure he would love to have his own building. But I don't know what his if he has anything set in stone yet.
Right. So you got into this old Bigfoot thing through writing and everything. Are you heavily involved in it now? Do you go out searching, looking for Bigfoot out in the woods there in Maine?
I would love to be doing that. Unfortunately, the last year and a half has been really rocky as a small business owner. So yeah. I have been slave to the book mines, and have been doing that predominantly. So, but I'm hoping in October once things kind of slow down and hopefully regulate themselves a little bit better, that I'll be going out and doing my first excursion again, since all this nonsense happened. I think the last hike I went on to go look at stuff was in, I think, February, right before COVID hit. So it's been a long wait to get my feet back out on the ground out there. so I'm hoping that all starts up again soon. But I had to survival came first. So sadly.
No, we understand totally.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's your thoughts on Bigfoot, Michelle? What do you think Bigfoot is?
That's a really good question. I've talked to a lot of people with different opinions of their own, and looked and listened to as many different case studies as I could. I have to, obviously they're a primate, as we are. They seem to have certain humanistic qualities to them that other primates do not. And, I've heard people talk about whether they're, like just a different race of humans, which, obviously could explain some of the issues with differentiating DNA. If they're very close relatives, that would make things really complicated when you're trying to parse data out. But I know that, their pursuits and their focuses are not those of, modern Homo sapiens. In Susie's account at the beginning of the book, she at one point tried to teach them, the family that she spent time with, she tried to teach the older male, the father, how to play cards. And he was not interested. But at the same time, he understood that she, as a kid, liked playing with toys. And so if he found like an abandoned Tonka truck out in the woods, he would bring it to her because he knew that she would enjoy it. So there's some interesting questions about how similar and how different they are to us. And it seems like they're definitely closer in nature than a lot of other primates. So I think,
right.
One of the reasons people kind of push and pull so much with the existence of Bigfoot is because, if and when we prove their existence, there are going to be a lot of big questions and a lot of, philosophical upheaval that's going to happen, and it's going to be tough for people to deal with. And I think that's at the heart of a lot of the controversy, is because everybody knows this is a big deal, whatever it is.
Yeah, I agree.
So on that note, then why do you think Bigfoot hasn't been proven that it is existence?
That is something that I, like many others, have, really struggled with. Given they're very elusive, they're very skilled at avoiding human contact. Presumably, they are leaving DNA evidence behind, which also supposedly we've been collecting. But every time it comes down to analysis, nothing definitive has been gleaned from that. So I don't know. It's either, really poor collection of evidence or poor data to compare it to identify it, or things get fumbled on purpose. I don't know. It's one of those circular logic things where you just go in circles and there's no good answer. And so all you can do is, like the folks that at Maine Bigfoot Foundation keep trying to do, is figure out how can we get samples and how can we keep them uncompromised and get them analyzed legitimately, and try to take those steps. And there's a lot that's tied up in that, and especially since the majority of the people who are trying to pursue that don't have scientific training. They're just trying to do the best they can based on common sense and what they are working with for equipment. So So I don't know. I think it's encouraging that people like Dr. Todd Disotell is, working on the forefront of the eDNA analyzing and is pushing stuff forward in a legitimate direction. And I think that's really encouraging. And, hopefully, and Dr. Jeff Meldrum is also looking at it also from, not only those viewpoints, but also from like a broader anthropological viewpoint and trying to kind of push the anthropological institution into looking at things beyond a linear evolution. And so it's encouraging that there are small pushes for change happening within the scientific community alongside a lot of activity in the amateur community. It would be really nice if there was more cooperation and more organization of all of that to reach a conclusion.
Right.
Right.
Well, I think you're talking about the DNA and all that. Here's what I think. I think that somewhere along the line, whatever species we came from split. One went to a gorilla form and one went to a human form. And somewhere in the middle of there, you've got another species that kind of stayed in between both of those things. And I think that's what Bigfoot Sasquatch is. People describe them as being human looking a lot more times than not. I think they're your basic, what people were told were cavemen back in the day. That's what Bigfoot is a caveman. And the reason that you can't, first of all, they have nothing to compare the DNA to because they don't have anything, or they don't know that they have something. Yeah. Second, it's going to show human trait in it, so they're automatically going to say, well, it's been compromised with human DNA, so it's no good. So it's either one of the two things are there, and so no one's ever going to say, well, yeah, it's Bigfoot DNA. Well, how do you know? You have nothing to compare it to. All you can say is it's unknown, and if you get that more so than the human part, you're onto something. But still, I believe these things do have some human part to them. And because of that, you're always going to get that human kind of DNA. What are we compared to chimpanzees or gorillas? 98% close? Is that what we are?
Yeah, something like that.
So we could be 99.5% close to these things, right?
Yeah. I have a feeling they're very close relatives, and that's creating some of the difficulty in differentiating that we're seeing. So it'll be interesting to see if they can build. I know that there are some, I think, like the Olympic group and a few others that are trying to do really hardcore analysis and collecting samples. It would be nice to see eventually if a database is built up well enough that we have a comparison point just from all the combined data that allows them to start saying, well, wait a minute, all this stuff that was inconclusive all matches itself. So maybe within that, they can build up at least a prototype of what the DNA chain that we're looking for is. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Right.
Yeah, well, for sure.
Yeah. So I have a theory, or I have a question about Maine and Bigfoot for you, Michelle. I go a lot on the BFRO website, which talks about, when people report their encounters to the BFRO, they pinpoint it and show it on the map and whatnot. And surprisingly, Maine doesn't have a lot of them, as many as I expected them to have. So my question is, do you think it's just because there's really not a lot of Bigfoot in Maine? Or do you think that so many people are seeing them, they just don't report them anymore? Or they're just like, well, yeah, I saw a Bigfoot, whatever. I mean, is it that, do you think it's the population could be that dense up there?
Well, I think it's pretty complicated. I think that it's not because there aren't encounters and sightings here. That is clearly, it's the BFRO totals that they post on their site are not reflective of the activity in Maine. And I think that for multiple reasons. There are reports, a lot of reports, especially since Finding Bigfoot started airing. I don't know if you've ever looked at the difference between the sequential numbering on their reports from before Finding Bigfoot came out compared to now. They received tens of thousands of reports once Finding Bigfoot started airing. And so there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been processed and is not publicly listed on the site.
Okay.
That has been reported to them.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah. And the other complication is that there are people like Janelle and other people that I talked to who did report it to the BFRO and either never heard anything back or found the response to be either dismissive or distracted or, not what they were looking for at all. And I think word kind of spread that the BFRO was not necessarily to be trusted with this kind of information. And especially when they started doing paid expeditions in Maine, which were predominantly out-of-state people coming in and paying the BFRO to camp with them on these expeditions. I think that soured the pot a little further.
Yeah,
Mainers tend to keep things to themselves anyways, and so I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. But I can guarantee you.
Yeah, and I'm not promoting. I'm not promoting BFRO at all. It's just one of the sites you can use to go look and see activity. But I knew when I saw that, I'm like, this has to be where people just aren't reporting it.
Yeah.
They're not reporting it.
Yeah. And they do have some really good people who are volunteering with them as regional reps, but not everybody is great. I know they have one guy who doesn't live in Maine but handles some of the Maine reports, and he's great. But he hasn't been there forever, and his predecessors, I think, probably some of his predecessors set a low bar. So there are really dedicated people that work with BFRO, but they're individuals working within a very large group of people. So it's difficult to generalize, but I can definitely tell you that the number of Maine reports on the BFRO site is not the actual number of encounters and sightings, for sure.
I believe you.
Yeah, I believe it.
So, do you think it's going to take a body to prove Bigfoot exists? And are you? I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you think it's right to kill one to make that happen?
I think a body would certainly tie the knot. I am of the no-kill camp, I guess you could call it. I'm not. That's not my goal, and I'm not going to generally associate with people who that's their prime goal. That's a very different faction, I think. But I also understand that the body is paramount. You need a hologram. You need the holotype, the one specimen that allows you to draw all the samples you need and, compare all the tissues and, all of that. And I've talked to, there's another Maine Bigfoot investigator who's actually written a Sasquatch Hunter's Field Guide. And even when I talked to him, because the whole thing is we need a body. And when I talked to him, I was like, do you think you could actually shoot one if you had the chance? And he's like, I don't know. I'd really much rather find a carcass somewhere and be able to recover the carcass than be put in a position where I might have to shoot one because I don't know if I could do it.
Right.
Wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all? Right. Well, I've got one more question for you before we wrap this up. Do you believe there's any paranormal alien attachment to Bigfoot going on?
Oh, that's a good question. I know there are lots of reports that kind of parallel and align themselves with UFO activity. That's undeniable, and it would be foolish to say that doesn't happen. But I have not encountered anything or talked to people who have been able to illuminate anything for me that would actually directly tie them together. It could just be something as vague as there are certain times and places where activity is high just in general in all sorts of weird ways, like those sort of window areas where just for whatever reason, there are coinciding forces at work that everybody pays attention to, and then they see everything. But beyond that, I could not say for sure. I would say that I'm not going to dismiss that because there's obviously reports that tie the two together. But my basic pursuit of the idea of Bigfoot is an earthbound biological mammal that lives alongside of us.
Mm-hmm.
And any exceptional abilities it might have. I mean, the infrasound makes sense. There are other animals that have infrasound capabilities already. Things like that. That all makes sense in that context. But things like, I know people surmise there might be teleportation involved and other stuff like that. I have no idea. That's that's outside of my bailiwick.
Right.
But it's definitely interesting.
Neither do we.
I'll tell you that. It's definitely interesting.
Neither do we.
It is for sure.
And nobody knows. Nobody knows really what these things are, you know. And we may never know what these things are.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think one of the things that gets overlooked is that there is, obviously there are going to be differences in them. They're not all going to be the same. And I've talked to people who have encountered ones that are different than the standard, the dark hair, generally curious but not too threatening demeanor, like that kind of thing. And then that same person who had encountered stuff that was of a much more violent and aggressive nature, very different coloration, very different behavior. So I would say that, as within any species, there are going to be different types emerging. And I think that's something that gets overlooked a lot. It's not just one Bigfoot, it's multiple. And then within those multiples, there are other delineations that occur too, whether because of climate or breeding or whatever else. I think we're going to be looking at a variety in the end. It's not just going to be one type. It's going to be multiples. So
kind of like people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They have their own personalities. Well, we thank you for coming on, Michelle. It was awesome talking to you. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah, it's been really great. I'm glad we finally got to chat.
Us too.
Me too. It was fun. We're definitely gonna get that link out there so people can get your book.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I'm going to check out the other book, Strange Maine. What was the whole title there? Strange Maine what?
Strange Maine, True Tales from the Pine Tree State.
Gotcha. I definitely want to check that one out too.
Yeah, I want to check that one out too.
And if I'm in Maine again, if we're in Maine again, we'll stop by your store and see what else you got there. So, and listeners as well.
That would be awesome.
Hopefully the listeners will check it out if they're in Maine and see what you got there and say hello. So,
yeah,
Woo-hoo.
For sure.
All right, Michelle, you have a good night. You take care. We appreciate it again.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. You guys do too. I'll look forward to listening to more of your episodes too.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
We appreciate that.
All right. Bye, guys.
I'm glad we finally got Michelle on and talked to her about all this cool stuff, man.
Me too. That was fun.
Yeah.
10 years to write that book. I don't know if we have 10 years.
Right. Well, we kind of stuff it on as much as we can, but hey,
that's right.
That's what's cool.
Yeah, but it was a good book and she was fun to talk to. So I'm glad we got her on finally.
Yeah. She had some interesting concepts and some stories, and I'm really glad we brought her on for sure. So if you guys are out in Portland, Maine, make sure you check out Michelle's store and check out her books.
Bookshop.
Mm-hmm. And Bigfoot in Maine is one of her books. So be sure to check that out. And thanks again to all the listeners. If you guys have had an encounter and you want to come on the show, email us at info@cryptidcreatures.co.
You can get us on Twitter.
Yep.
You can get us on Instagram.
Yep. Reach out to us. Get a hold of us, guys. We look forward to hearing from you. So thanks again. We appreciate it.
Always.
Brian, until next time, take care, man.
See ya.